Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. We have our first look at the Mercedes W17 and not all is as it appears. They released the renders of the car and the new livery they're going to be running, but the car that hit the track today for a shakedown in Silverstone was not the same car by any means. Multiple changes that we have noticed, especially when it comes to these side pods they're working on, similarities to Red Bull, big differences to other teams, major efficiency in the packaging at the rear of this car as well that might be critical when it comes to efficiency on the straights this season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts on the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Just to begin with the Autosport Awards, they confirmed a few of the champions and the winners last night. Team of the Year went to McLaren, obviously. British Competition Driver of the Year went to Lando Norris. I mean, he won the title, but he did not win Driver of the Year. That went to Max Verstappen, who was, look, he didn't win the championship in the end. He was only 2 points adrift. What could have been if what happened in Spain or other races went differently? But I think most would consider probably Max with the comeback that he made. Max even himself said that was the best season on the whole that he'd driven in Formula 1. Isaac Hadjar won Rookie of the Year. There, of course, was quite some debate about this, given that when the drivers voted in their Driver of the Year rankings, and they put everyone 1 to 10, 1 to 20, whatever, the highest rated rookie by both the drivers and by the team principals was Ollie Behrman, not Hadjar. But I think you could argue it either way. Congratulations to all of those. Now, testing is coming up very shortly in Barcelona. The Mercedes will be there. There might be one team that's not there. We'll discuss that in a second. The Red Bull, though, will be. We will get back to this Red Bull design and the way that the side pods look on this car and potential similarities to Mercedes. The plan for Red Bull is they want to turn up on day one and get cracking. So, if you guys aren't familiar, Barcelona, in just a few days' time, 26th of January, that Monday, Red Bull want to be on the track. Now, you can only run 3 of the 5 days of the calendar week, so some teams are not intending to run on the Monday. In fact, McLaren, their target is Tuesday at the very earliest, but Red Bull, presumably they want to ensure they get the best of the weather conditions. They will be there Monday and they want to crack on immediately. Other teams are in a similar boat. Other teams have other ideas. McLaren are intending to skip the first day. As we think are Ferrari, they are planning Ferrari to go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, there is a reason for that from the McLaren side. Apparently, they are doing this to maximize their development time. Now, you might think, well, what's an extra day, right? Come on. But McLaren believe this can be critical, putting everything together. Every single percentage advantage might be useful, and an extra day or a couple of days of testing time might be valuable when it comes to preparing a car. This is why some of the top teams, we haven't really seen what they've been up to kind of until now. Aston Martin are in kind of a similar position as well. Obviously, it's difficult to know what to expect from them with the engine questions and the simulator problems they had that Newey needed to spend some time resolving. But look, Audi, Cadillac, for example, it makes sense for those teams to get a car ready quite early, a functional car, so you can crack on. They're not expecting to fight for the title. But if McLaren want to retain their title, they have to take a high-risk approach. They need to spend a long time and pushing things back as long as possible because, look, if you created a car back in November and it was ready to go then, you're going to be way behind the curve when it comes to the start of the season from a developmental perspective. So that's why McLaren are taking some level of risk. Will it pay off? We'll see. Of course, they do have a disadvantage in that they do not make their own engines, and for this year's packaging, that might be critical. This is all they have shown us so far. This is what we see of the MCL40. We have a silhouette, and that is it. And even, of course, this is not even worth looking at because even the actual render that they're showing here is not going to be the real car anyway, so it simply doesn't matter. But yes, the McLaren will arrive at some point. Will they be good enough to defend the title? Possibly, possibly not. But the big talking point of today is on the Mercedes Works team, what is considered to be maybe the most fearsome car of this new era. Now, before we get there, we've got to talk about Williams. So, not much talk on Williams in recent weeks, apart from the fact that they're Mercedes-powered. There was talk of Alpine being at the minimum weight, so people are like, okay, how are Williams going to get on? We know that they're talking to a game. They sacrificed a lot for this season. They started work, we think, on this car maybe earlier than anyone else. They didn't really do anything in 2025 as a result. James Vowles initiated multiple changes behind the scenes of that team over the last couple of years to get them to the point where they could at least be viable competitively once again at the front end of the spearhead of the championship, as it were. And they've got the Mercedes engine. Okay, Williams, in theory, would be fighting for, third, I think, at best, right? I think the idea might be try to beat Alpine and then hope that the Mercedes engine is so good that nobody else has a chance. But that would, of course, be a huge step towards where they want to be once again. However, things may have changed on this front. Now, Ralph Bach, an F1 insider, yes, maybe not the most reliable source, but he says that Williams might miss the Barcelona test, and it's not just this source. I did see some reaction to this saying, oh, it's F1 Insider, don't take it seriously. But no, I think, as far as I understand, take this seriously. Williams are having issues, they are behind the curve, they've got a problem with their chassis, and they've not passed the crash test yet. And, well, if that's true, then they might be compromised because this first test in Barcelona is in just a couple of days' time. So, yes, that is the leading reporting. F1 Insider is quoted as saying, what I keep hearing more and more often is that Williams won't even make it to Barcelona, not even for chassis reasons. There are people who say they're not even going there because the chassis isn't up to scratch, and with all that extra weight, and they can't manage it. Can't manage it with a lot of excess weight, and they just can't get it right. So that's rumours. Whether it's true, we'll see. But if Williams is there, then it wasn't true. But if it's there, well, good night, he says. So, look, we'll see on this one. Look, it was probably inevitable. One of the teams was going to cock up big time, right? And is it going to be Williams? I don't know. But it could well be. And we'll find out in the coming days whether they're actually there or not. They've not got long to hide. And if we turn up to Barcelona and there's no Williams on the track, then I think we'll know where they stand. And they'll have, well, a bit of time to get ready before Bahrain, after Barcelona. But even then, it's going to be massively compromised as a season if this is true. So, yes, problems at Williams. As far as I understand, there is at least something to this rumour. We'll find out over the coming days. The other update quickly on McLaren is on the pushrod front suspension. Now, this was a kind of a key talking point. McLaren the last couple of years, they went to a pull rod front suspension, which was the favoured way to go in the previous regulations, but they went very heavy on the anti-dive, as it turned out. And that was associated with Lando Norris losing a bit of feel in the front of the car. The car was fast, nobody denies that. Lando has said it himself. But it is believed, and Lando said this, and the team said this, that given the way that they went with the front suspension, the move to a pull rod, the move to massive anti-dive for the aero platform, it's limited Lando's ability to maybe get the best out of himself in a way that he previously had done. Now, they did make a slight adjustment to Lando's suspension. They had two slightly different versions of it. Lando preferred one, Oscar preferred the other. But still, it is a talking point going back into the new season because Lando, before 2025, dominated pretty much all of his teammates. At least since Daniel Ricciardo, right, when he vanquished Ricciardo without issue and then beat Piastri comfortably, understandably, of course, Piastri was a rookie for the first two seasons. But then last year, things changed and Piastri took a big step, but also Lando no doubt took a step back. At the end of the season, he had a great run and he did enough to get over the line, and very impressively in many of those weekends, Mexico, Brazil, etc., etc. Piastri fell off. We know how it went. But the point is that Lando fans are seeing this and maybe being excited. Could Lando have a better feel for these new cars? Is he going to be back to a teammate supremacy type situation? It may not matter for championship ambitions, depending on how good this car proves to be. So George Russell confirms, well, the team confirmed that George Russell commented, Microsoft is a new partner for Mercedes. I think it's rumours like a $60 million a year deal, so a substantial partnership for sure. It does appear as well, the logo on their race suits, of course. It is, though, just white on there rather than any colour. Of course, some people prefer the colour, some don't. This is the W17, and, well, what do we think about it? It's interesting that the Audi has moved in the direction of being quite silver, because Mercedes have, over the last few years, gone away, really, from being the silver arrows. They now like this more silver and black, silver carbon approach with the Petronas blue, or Petronas green, whatever it's meant to be. It's kind of in between, to be honest. So, this is the car. And I think from this angle, yeah, it is what it is. From other angles, it's actually kind of beautiful. So the top-down view, I think, of this Mercedes is stunning. From that angle, it really slaps. This is what the livery looks like. Again, it's kind of similar to what we've seen for the last few years. The big difference, really, though, being this top-down view on the sidepods. I think what they're going for there is kind of like the AMG logo, right? So the AMG logo with the slashes. I think that's what they've got envisioned here on the sidepods. But also we can have a look at the car. Look at the sidepods themselves. I will just draw your attention before we move on to some other images to this shot of the sidepod. Just keep this one in mind. You can see the sidepod inlet. You can see there's not a massive undercut here. There's this like bulbous section, but it's there's not anything crazy going on this render with the sidepod. However, when we see the real car, things do seem rather different. This is that top-down view, as I say. I think from this angle, it's pretty killer, to be honest. So, yeah, like what Mercedes has done, I think just in general, these cars look really good. I'd also point out, this edge on the leading edge of the floor is a very aerodynamically important component of the car, and there is an allowance to actually have a stay because of the way this part is designed. It will have enormous forces on it if you didn't have a stay there. And you can do that, and some teams will. And this is definitely not optimal to have a connecting rod here, but the forces on this make it potentially quite fragile, and the Williams, it would probably just snap off. We've seen their car struggle with that in recent years. So the idea is you have a rod to make sure that doesn't happen, because you could strengthen it up so it doesn't snap off, but that adds weight, right? So there's a debate, because it's easier from a weight perspective to do this, but it costs you somewhat aerodynamically. I did see that Alpine have done something similar to this, but actually they've got two connecting rods, and maybe they are shaped in a way that is aerodynamically inclined. Of course, that is always the intention. Whether a real car will have these, I guess we'll see. This is the other angle of the, well, you can see the sidepod pretty clearly here as well, and we'll see some of the differences on the real thing, because this leading edge of the floor as well is, I don't believe that will be their final version by any means. However, we then got to see the car for real, and fair play to Mercedes, because they're usually quite good at this, and you can argue it's because they're very confident. That may also be true, but they have given us some great footage today and some shots of their car, even up close. This was not one of those. This is from a gentleman, DJ Audits, who turned up to the track, put his drone in the sky at the final corner, and then got a little shot here of the new W17. There actually is even a better shot of this, which is this one. So I'll share a couple of videos here. This shot I thought was brilliant. Harry pointed this out, and you properly get to hear it in this video, which is nice. Probably the best up close, at least amateur footage that we have had just yet. But then we get Mercedes themselves put out their own video showing off the car. So immediately lots of reaction to seeing the W17 for real, and changes that we will note. Now, this rendered version of this leading edge of the floor is actually very similar, if not the same, to what they have on the actual car. And I will say, this is very different to what other teams have come up with. Other teams largely have an upward element at the front, and then they have three components from there, whereas Mercedes, they've kind of done away with that. As I say, I think this will be a key area of development for the teams. The rules allow you to do quite a lot here and be quite clever with it. So I think this will be a key area to focus on this season. And Mercedes, it seems, have a rather different approach to other people. Dr. Robs talks about the ruling and the inflection points and all of those details that make this possible, but and why this could be critical to pushing some of the wake out boards right from the front tyre. But other teams have a different approach, and we'll get to, well, actually, I'll just share it right now. This is the Red Bull, and you can see their edge of the floor, which is more common that we've seen, with this like front element and then the three planes from there. But Mercedes have a very different interpretation, at least for the time being. So that's one thing to look at. The other thing to look at is the packaging of it. So it is a push rod front suspension, as we expect. Most of the teams have gone down this route. Mercedes are no different. When you look at some of these angles of it rolling out the garage, you can see, firstly, the airbox is certainly smaller than we saw on the racing bulls that we discussed yesterday. But also the packaging, right? You can't see from this angle much of the rear of the car, from at least this shot, because the packaging of the engine seems to be very tight and very efficient, probably more so than other teams are going to be capable of. But this, I think, is really the killer shot. You can see it at the back, how efficiently it looks to be packaged, but this side pod is a very notably different sidepod to what we have seen in the actual render itself. So that's worthy of further discussion, but as Duquesa says, the hood and the bodywork very efficient. They've stayed pretty faithful to the design of the previous cars, and that's what I think is very interesting about this. There was an expectation that in this era, the sidepods would start to look different. They might move away from the undercut and have a, well, kind of what Haas unveiled and what Ferrari might be doing, with less undercuts, but more using the top of the sidepod to control the wake. We'll see what Ferrari come up with in the coming days for sure, but I think it's fascinating that Mercedes have shown us this. Again, it's Mercedes, and they've decided to give us a video and give us this shot. I mean, this is a very high quality shot of these cars so far. And Mercedes have given this to us themselves. This was in their video that we just saw. And all these teams know how to play the games, right? So it's possible this is a different sidepod, but I'd be shocked if this is not the car that they show up to at least Barcelona with. Now, maybe their plan for Bahrain and then their plan for Melbourne would be somewhat different. But this appears to be the early implications of their concept, and again, maybe they're so confident they don't really care sharing it with us. This is what the front of the car looks like, especially that leading part of the front wing. There's a couple of sponsors slapped on here as well, so, you know, they've obviously made that happen. But very interesting, and PJ from Auto Racer says that he was not expecting the undercuts to be so aggressive. And to be fair, we've not seen that on the other cars, with the exception of the Red Bull, right? Because if you look at the Red Bull sidepod, you see a similar type of thing. In fact, the Red Bull sidepod is probably even smaller in many ways, certainly towards the rear. But again, it retains that quite deep undercut component, which it looks like the Mercedes are introducing as well. The other thing to say from this angle is that you can see here at least a little bit of rake. It does appear, anyway, in this image, I mean, almost certainly, unless the perspective is very confused, that the rear is riding higher than the front of the car. And it's interesting if they are setting it up with some rake. Again, you can see a nice angle of the undercut on that sidepod here. So, yeah, fascinating that Mercedes showed us a render. The real thing is definitely different. The actual real thing that turns up in probably Bahrain and then potentially Melbourne will certainly be different again. But this is the early ideas that we have around this car. Again, is the rake back? Because if it's back for Mercedes, then for sure it'll be back for Aston Martin and Adrian Newey and, possibly for Red Bull as well. I guess we'll see what they come up with. When we get some proper footage of their car on the track, probably it's, the shakedown in Barcelona. Again, it's going to be tough because these images of the Mercedes that we've just seen given out by Mercedes, we're probably not going to get any better images of that, even in the Barcelona test. There will be some long lenses in action, for sure, but we'll see what we get. Also, this is just noted that the actual version of the car on the left-hand side, compared to what was in the renders, does again appear to be different when it comes to the rear of the car. But, yeah, look, they've shown us. They've given us the pictures, and that's where we are for now. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Just one final thing. Questions on the state of affairs at Ferrari. Apparently it's been a delicate few weeks at Maranello. There's been a serious multi-level reshuffle of personnel. There was talk that some of the individuals from the WEC project are coming over because they were winning, so we need to bring them into Formula 1. I think that's the logic anyway. It's not clear who's going to replace Adami. There have been some talk about, well, I think Luca Diella was the name that's mostly mentioned, but it will be an internal resource. They're not going to somehow get Bono and pay him like infinite money and pay Mercedes infinite money to get him out of gardening leave. That's not going to happen. It will be someone from Ferrari. Duquesa says, Bella will be beautiful, let's hope she is fast too. So he's happy with the car. There's talk about the glossy livery or maybe the HP logo is going to be different. I'm sure that this era regs in the red is going to look stunning. I'm sure the Ferrari will be a beautiful car. Will she be fast, says Duquesa. That definitely remains to be seen. One final thing on Aston Martin. As I say, there's so many moving parts. The engine is one, the fuel is another. We've got to be pretty confident in Newey and his team designing a good chassis. But the question is, and I'm sure there'll be some very interesting ideas in there, fascinated to see what their concepts are in some of these key areas that we've discussed on the sidepod, on the suspension, on the packaging of the car, on the leading edge of the floor, all that stuff. But Honda are understood to have made some progress on the electric side, where they were considered, frankly, the benchmark the last few years. But their internal combustion engine is maybe still not optimal, and that is a concern given that the ICE still remains, as far as we understand, the critical performance differentiator for the upcoming season, certainly from an engine perspective. So yes, thank you for watching as always. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.